Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about Champion Select and how you can improve your Champion Select strategy for League of Legends. So special thanks, first of all, to Chris for sponsoring this guide. I greatly appreciate his very generous donation. And what we're going to do is we're going to first talk about ban theory and why you should ban certain champions and how you can improve your rate of success by banning certain champions. And then we're going to go through and talking about respecting the pick order and how that should affect the champions that you're picking, which will also improve your win rate. And then we're going to talk about the concept of dodging and how dodging can actually gain you a lot of elo. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand because they haven't done the stats behind it. So I'm going to give you the stats. It's nice, it's approachable, very friendly math. Great conversation about that. I'll give you a very quick spoiler. If you play League 200 days per year and dodge one of the 40% chance to win games, so if you just use your dodge every day, you can gain around 200 LP. That's 2 divisions. That's the difference between ending the season in Silver 2 or getting that coveted Gold 5 that a lot of people want, or Platinum 2 and getting to Diamond. So it's a really, really big deal to learn how to manage your dodges correctly. And so we're going to spend a lot of time with that. And then we're going to talk about how to determine the likelihood of success so that you can make an informed decision about dodges as well. And so we've got a few different theories about that, and we'll work our way towards that. So overall, that's what's going to be going on in this video. I hope you'll enjoy it. If you want to follow along, be sure to check out in the description. I'll always give you the timestamps to jump around to the sections that you find most useful, and you can also find a link to this Google document in the description as well. So if you need to skip around and maybe you only have 15 minutes and you just want to watch one section of it, then at least you can read the other sections that maybe you don't have time to watch. If you're new to the channel, then I do very detailed analyses in all of my guides, so I really try to give people as much information as I possibly can. And if people want a TLDR version, then that's why I give them the Google Docs. You can just skim the parts that you want to skip over, and you can use the timestamp. So it's very long, but it's very user-friendly and very approachable. There's also not a lot of fancy graphics in my guides. It's just going over the Google Doc. Typically, sometimes I'll pull up some stuff on League Wikia, or sometimes I'll pull up the League map and point out a few things, but it's not very graphic intensive, which means that you can just listen to it almost like an audiobook, just as you're driving to work, as you're going to sleep, as you're eating or cleaning the house. So I try to make it very, very accessible so people can get a lot of information in their busy lives, even though it's going to be very detailed information. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So first of all, let's talk about ban theory. So I don't think that a lot of people put a lot of consideration into which champions they ban. I think oftentimes the default position is just ban something that you don't like. So you don't like going against Teemo top and you're a top laner, you just ban him. You don't want to go against Darius top, you just ban him. But you really should be using your ban as a very valuable resource, because over time, if you are banning champions that aren't optimal bans, then you're lowering your chances to win by a lot. So you want to make sure that you are banning the correct champions. And we'll get into why that's so important when we talk about respecting the pick order and the pick position here in a little bit. But bans are kind of the first step in the champion select process, and they're quite important. So what should you ban then? So there are websites that'll tell you like top ranked bans and all this other stuff, but you need to learn how to think critically and make informed decisions about what you should ban, because sometimes those websites are correct and sometimes they're incorrect. So the most popular champions are not all the most popular champions that are banned are not always the champions that should be banned. Often they are. You know, there is something to be said for I guess numbers validation, or very large numbers. If enough people are doing it, it's, you know, probably fairly accurate, but that's not always true. Sometimes, you know, the greater population really doesn't understand and they just parrot and do what everyone else does. So what should you ban then? What should you think about? So there are a few different ways that you can think about banning. The most common way, and usually the most productive way to use your ban, is to ban a champion that is universally too strong. Now, if you have first pick and you set up, you know, a deal with someone on your team to first pick that champion for them. So, for example, if your first pick support, you may not want to ban Lulu, even though she's on the list for universally too strong right now, according to all of these metrics that we'll talk about here in a second. You might want to leave her open because you might be able to first pick her. Now, if the enemy team has first pick, then you need to be very careful with that. In pro play, they deliberately leave things open sometimes to try to force people to get one good pick on first pick, and then the second rotation will get 2 good picks. So that's a very complicated strategy in pro play that isn't really applicable to solo queue. It's very difficult to count on your allies to double pick really good champions. So in general, you just want to try to just roll down the list and just ban the things that are universally too strong. Okay, so what goes into universal strength? So what goes into something being very strong, a very strong early pick? Because some things are very good counter picks. You don't want to ban things typically that are very strong counter picks. I know that, you know, sometimes if you want to first pick your favorite champion, like you're a one-trick, I don't know, Riven top, and Darius counters you really hard, and you just want to go ahead and ban it because you absolutely want to play Riven. I mean, the calculus gets a little different for one-tricks, but in general, you know, if you're banning out the Darius because you hate Darius because he counters you if you're a Riven top in some circumstances. That may not be true. I don't play top lane. Riven might be able to beat Darius, but that just seems like a matchup that could be challenging. If that's the case, then you might let something through like Kassadin or Lulu or, you know, some other really strong universal pick that's really going to cause your team to lose. So even though you might have a better chance in your lane if you ban out that counter pick, if you let through those universals, you might have a big problem later. So I think in general, the strongest thing is just to ban the stuff that's universally too strong unless you're first pick or you have set up a deal to get a first pick on your team for one of these really good champions. Okay, so high scaling. That's number one in my mind. Now, there are some champions that can be really strong and win a ton of games that don't scale very well, that fall off after 25 minutes. So one of the best ones I can think of here might be like Pantheon from patches 7.1 to 7.4. He's okay, but like Lethality Pantheon or Lethality Quinn are really good examples of this. Champions that are very oppressive, very strong early on, but then as it gets longer into the game and people get access to more armor, more defensive stats, team fighting starts and there's more crowd control coming from the support and the jungler, depending on those picks, then they fall off later in the game. But in general, you know, I would highly recommend picking things that scale long because a lot of games will go long, especially in the bronze and silver brackets. As you go up, games go faster because people know how to close them out more efficiently. But high scaling just gives you very good insurance against longer games. It means that if the games go long, you have a much higher chance of winning the game than your counterparts. And there are plenty of very good champions that are pretty decent in the early game that also have very high scaling. So someone like Anivia is still pretty good because she has such great wave clear, especially starting at level 6. And she scales super strong later into the game. Now, another example might be someone like Caitlyn, who is not ban-worthy necessarily, but she's very good early and she's very good late. Okay? So high scaling is something that probably, you know, should be a check on your list for should I ban this champion or not. If it scales, if it's really strong later into the game, it might deserve a ban. Useful in many compositions. So, you know, champions that get banned that you want to stop from being first picks are useful in almost any composition. So you don't have to have a special situation for them. So there are certain champions that are really good in very specific situations, like Kog'Maw, for example. If your team has a Lulu and an Ivern, then Kog'Maw typically can become almost unstoppable if the Kog'Maw can position at all in a team fight. It's really hard to break through and get him. But Kog'Maw is not worth a ban right now because if you don't have the Lulu or you don't have the Ivern, then he's very susceptible to getting killed. So that's a pretty good example of someone who's really strong in the right composition, but is not strong enough universally in a bunch of different compositions to warrant a ban. You know, so someone who's strong in almost any composition right now would be like Kassadin, for example. He's good. So you don't necessarily have to have a pick comp or an assassination comp or a split push comp for him to be good. Like, his numbers are so off the charts right now, and I talk about this in my 7.7. So I was on the Kassadin train way back when they made those adjustments, when a lot of people weren't talking about him. Now people are starting to figure it out. I think he's extremely strong. Another one would be something like Ivern, very good. Even if you're not playing like a Protect the Cogmaw composition, he's very, very powerful right now in almost any composition because of his very unique itemization and his jungle pathing. So very difficult to deal with, definitely worth a ban in many compositions. And Lulu. You don't need a special comp for Lulu, so even if you don't have a Twitch or you don't have a Cogmaw on your team, even if you have an Ezreal, she's still really powerful because of her crowd control, her utility, and her scaling later in the game with her W. So it needs to be something, if you're banning it, that's going to be good in a lot of compositions. So if it's good sometimes, but there's okay counter picks to it, or it's only really good if it gets super far ahead and super fed, then that could be something where you might want to consider banning something else. Uniquely powerful, so no comparable replacement. This is very important, and a lot of people don't think about this. There's really not a point in banning a champion if there's a similar champion that's almost just as good. So this is why someone like Caitlyn would not be banned, and this is why AD carries are not popular bans right now, because there's so many good AD carries out there. Like, there are plenty of bad ones, but there are numerous very good AD carries right now, and they do play, differently from each other, but the really good ones have very similar scaling, and none of them really stand out so much above the others that they deserve a ban. So yes, is Draven really good? Yes, he is. Is Twitch really good? Yes, he is. Caitlyn's good. Kallista's good right now. Xayah's good right now. Lucian's good in solo queue if you don't know who your support is. So Lucian would probably be the only... Lucian or maybe Twitch would be the only ones that you would want to consider for banning based on the uniquely powerful. Because Lucian is very good if it's a good player and he can still win the game even if his support is underperforming. Because he can snowball really hard early in the game. He's very powerful. He can punish people early. But he does have limited range. Like, he has plenty of drawbacks to him. He's a decently high skill cap. And Twitch could uniquely deserve a ban because his invisibility is just a complete terror in solo queue. So he doubles as a really good duelist, a really good assassin, or not doubles, I guess triples, and a really good team fighter. So that makes him very powerful. One of the things that limits Twitch and why he doesn't get banned so much right now is his popularity, which we'll talk about here in a second. A lot of people don't pick Twitch, so it's okay to leave him up, more so than other champions that people would be very likely to pick. So, right now, if you leave up Lulu, the probability that she's going to get picked up is extremely high. Like, almost everybody universally recognizes that she's a very, very strong support right now. And so she's going to get picked if you leave her up. So the popularity, if you're worried about, well, Twitch and Lulu are both overpowered, I don't want to play against either one of them, you should probably ban Lulu because she's a lot more popular. Okay, so uniquely powerful, so there is no comparison. So champions like this, might be, like I said, Lulu because of her kit. Janna is powerful, but Janna doesn't have the same kind of initiation tools as Lulu. So Lulu has Peel, and she has initiations. That's what kind of puts her a step above the rest right now. Ivern's another one. He's just very weird. There's no one like Ivern in the jungle. Like I said, because of his pathing and his itemization allows him to power spike really quickly because his items are very cheap and they're awesome at team fighting. And he can counter jungle and gank. He has some very creative gank paths. Just has a lot of crowd control, has a lot of shielding. Like, he's just very weird. Like, there's not another jungler that resembles Ivern at all, and he's very powerful. So that's a unique ban. And someone like Kassadin, there's just not someone that scales as hard and has quite the mobility of Kassadin in the mid lane. Like, someone like LeBlanc is useful, but what makes Kassadin unique is that he's just beats all of the other assassins. So he's the assassin of assassins. Like, he's not great against AD assassins, but since they've nerfed lethality so much and they specifically nerfed Talon last patch, then there's really not another AD assassin that can touch him in the mid lane right now. People just aren't playing him. So everyone's going to AP champions mid lane. I mean, maybe if someone builds like AD Fizz, I still think Kassadin would wear him out. Like, Kassadin is very, very strong. If you've never played in a meta where Kassadin's good, well, you're in for a treat. Or not a treat, because he is very, very oppressive historically. He's one of the most oppressive champions of all time. I think he probably has the highest consistent ban rate in that one season than any other champion. I think he had a 90% ban rate I don't remember which season that was. It was like season 3 or something. Almost all season, they never nerfed him. And he just had an absurd ban rate. For good reason. But he's not as good as he used to be, but he still is insane. And like I said, what makes him insane is that everyone's playing Magic right now in the mid lane, and he's very, very good against Magic. And he has a very high AP ratio, not super high on all of them, but a pretty high AP ratio on everything. So he's one of the only champions in the game that has 4 offensive spells that have a high AP ratio. So he's got 70% on his Q, he's got 70% on his W for autos, he has 70% on his Force Pulse, and his Rift Walk has, only 30%, but it can stack up and get even higher, and at level 16, it goes on a 2-second cooldown. And it also scales with mana. So his itemization is really strong, and he has really good matchups against virtually everyone in the mid lane. So that's why he's uniquely powerful, and he really needs a ban. Like, the only thing that kind of is holding him down right now is people don't know how good he is yet, and so he's not very popular. So that fits into another one. Not only uniquely powerful, but someone who has very limited counters. So there's not an easy way to counter Kassadin in the mid lane. Like, you could pick something like Talon, maybe a Pantheon. Counters do exist out there, but the counters are going to be weak to everything else in the meta probably. So you have to go very far out of your way to get a counter to Kassadin. And it really takes a team effort to hold him down. And even if you hold him down, he's still going to break loose if the game gets to 30 minutes and he gets all powered up. He still is going to be very, very strong and difficult to deal with. So Master Yi is another one. He's actually the #1 person that I recommend right now because he fits into a lot of these categories. He has extremely high scaling. He's very useful in many compositions just because of his raw power, and he has different modes. So he can split push, he can solo people out and duel them. He can team fight really well with his Alpha Strike. He takes objectives really quickly. So there are lots of different ways you can use him in different compositions. He's uniquely powerful because he has reset mechanics, and the way that he scales with on hit and specifically Fervor and Blade of the Ruined King is just out of control. So there's just not another jungler right now that scales as well as Kassadin or as well as Master Yi in solo queue. Now in pro play, he has problems because if people just pick a lot of crowd control, he can easily be dealt with. But that takes a lot of organization and thoughtful champion selection in solo queue that just doesn't happen. And so he's uniquely powerful, useful in a lot of compositions, very high scaling, relatively low skill cap. That's another one. So Master Yi, really good Master Yi players, there's a huge difference because they can dodge a bunch of crowd control with their Alpha Strike. But even if you aren't an awesome Master Yi player and you just get a couple of kills, you can still just Alpha Strike and then just start right-clicking people in a team fight and still take over the game. So he does have some skill to him at some levels, but he can still be really, really good even if you aren't a great player with him. Same thing with Kassadin. Like, there is something to be said for Kassadin positioning. You don't want to jump right in the middle of 5 people, but he's very, very friendly to mistakes because he has such high mobility. So even if you go in on somebody and you start losing the fight and you're like, oh man, they're stronger than I thought they were, you can typically get away because your escape is going to be up again in another, 4 seconds. So that's another thing. Very low skill cap deserves a ban. So there are some champions that are extremely powerful with the high skill cap, like Lee Sin, Riven, Yasuo, Fiora. All of these can take over games to be very powerful, but they require so much skill to play correctly that you can afford to let them slip through a lot of the times because there is a pretty high chance that the person on the other end is not going to be able to play those champions well enough to warrant a ban over other possible choices that are easier to play. Does that make sense? So, especially in bronze and silver. So yeah, maybe Riven can take over games, Yasuo can take over games and be really powerful, but there's a really high failure rate with those champions as well. So, banning someone who's a lot easier to play that can also take over games like Kassadin or Master Yi is probably a better choice. And then popularity is another one that I mentioned. Master Yi is really popular. A lot of people are starting to figure him out and play him a lot. And people can make, like, as far as low skill cap, people can make mistakes with itemization as well on Master Yi and Kassadin and still be very effective, and that's important. So, you know, I've seen Master Yi's not even go Blade of the Ruined King and just go, like, full crit build and still take over the game. Or I've seen some of them, you know, go almost full tank and not really build that much damage at all, and they still take over the game. So even if they're not going for the Blade of the Ruined King plus jungle item plus Sterix Gauge into GA, like the best build, they can still take over. Same thing with Kassadin. I mean, you know, Kassadin probably should go things like, I don't know his exact itemization, but stuff like GLP into, you know, other AP items, like Abyssal, tanky-ish AP items, like Abyssal Scepter, Zhonya's, stuff like that. But I saw one the other day that went, Muramana plus Frozen Fist and still took over the game and won. So he built this like goofy AD Kassadin and still took over because Kassadin has that much excess power. So low skill cap not only applies to being able to execute their moves, to being able, you know, in a team fight to do well, but also just skill in terms of like game state knowledge and itemization. So if people just itemize incorrectly, can they still take over the game? I mean, this is another thing that makes Twitch really good, which is why he's like borderline worth a ban, is because people can go Blade of the Ruined King instead of crit on Twitch and be very, very powerful. Like, I think that the crit build is way, way better than the Blade build in most situations, but they can still go for some goofy stuff and win with Twitch. You could probably still even get Ghost Blade with Twitch and take over games. Like, he's got that much excess power. So, yes. But the only thing, once again, that holds back Twitch is he's not as uniquely powerful as other ones. Like, he is powerful and he does have very unique stuff about him. That's why I think he's probably the most worthy of a ban of any AD carry, but there are so many other strong AD carries that, you know, banning him out doesn't necessarily achieve a lot all the time. Although, like I said, he could be worth it. If he gets more popular, if people start playing him a lot more, then I think he's probably worth a ban. But for now, he's got a fairly low pick rate compared to many other AD carries, so I don't think he's worth it for now. But if he gets more popular, you should definitely think about banning him. Okay. So that's kind of the most popular thing, is just check off this list if a champion meets those requirements. And I'll give you my top 6 bans right now. Oh, let's just go ahead and go to it. So if you're doing the best universal bans, I think it's Master Yi, Lulu, Ivern, Kassadin, Graves, and Anivia. All right. Ezreal maybe as a defensive ban if you don't want your team to pick him, which I'll talk about here in a second, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true. So, yeah, each one of these is uniquely powerful. There aren't a lot of champions that do exactly what these champions do. Like, Anivia has very unique wave clear and huge scaling with her AP. She's very difficult to close out games against Anivia. It's very hard to engage on her, and if you do, she has so much displacement with her wall and her slows and just burst damage with her E that it makes her very hard to deal with. And then Graves, still super powerful, very good duelist early on, tons of scaling later into the game, pretty tanky against AD champions in particular. I mentioned Kassadin a lot. Ivern, unique, very powerful. Lulu, very powerful. And Master Yi, public enemy number 1, I think, for solo queue. At least at, you know, Diamond 5 and lower. Okay. So let's talk about, so you can ban champions also. A strategy is to ban something if you're worried that your team might pick it. Now, I will preface this by saying if someone is hovering a champion, do not ban the champion that they hover. So if someone is hovering Ezreal, do not ban it. All right? Because that's just going to create too much mental friction, which we'll talk about kind of at the end, how mentality is another indicator of loss. So if you tilt somebody in champion select by banning their champion, then that's worse than just leaving the champion open. Trust me, it's worse most of the time. So if someone is hovering Ezreal, do not ban it. But if they aren't hovering anything, and you're worried they might pick Ezreal, or some other champion that you don't want them to pick, I mean, this has been done with, people do this with Yasuo sometimes. They'll ban him because they don't want someone on their team to play him. If it's a new champion that just got released, and you don't want your team playing it, or a champion that just got reworked that's maybe not that good, and you don't want your champion, or you don't want your team to play it, so maybe, you know, people could defensively ban things like a Mumu, or, I mean, Rockin and Zyra are both pretty good, but the reason that you would ban something that just got released or reworked is because people won't have experience on it, and they'll just come into solo queue and play something that they don't know how to play. Or if there's like a new skin that gets released for something and you're worried that people are going to pick it just to play the skin and they don't know how to play the champion. So like when those new Lux skins came out, there was a decent amount of Lux bans. Just because people didn't want amateurs on their team and ranked playing a champion they don't know how to play just so they can have the skin. Now, whether or not that's fair is, up to you. I mean, people should be able to enjoy their skins and play with them. But that is a viable strategy if you're worried that people are going to underperform on your team. If they pick a certain champion, you can ban it. So like I said, this is rare. You should generally ban universal champions. But if there's just an epidemic of people picking a champion that dramatically underperforms, then you might want to consider banning it. Right now, Ezreal's a possibility. Although typically I ban Master Yi. If someone on my team wants Master Yi, and I'm first pick, and I can pick Lulu, and then all of these other 4 get banned, and I have a ban, I guess I wouldn't be first pick if I had a ban, but if first pick is going to give me Lulu or something like that, there are scenarios where I might ban Ezreal, is what I'm saying. But it's a rare ban. But, I mean, I lose. Virtually every game that there's an Ezreal on my team, I lose the game. I didn't go through it. I meant to do this for this video. Maybe I can put it in the Google Doc after I finish up, but I meant to go through and I just forgot about it until now and just like count up the amount of games that I've won or lost with who I'm considering the top picks right now. I want to do it really quickly just to kind of have some fun here. So let me just look and see how often do I lose with Ezreal on my team. Okay, so that's 0-1. 0-2. Now, there's other factors too, but I'm just going to look here at the top 20 or so. Where am I in that? Oh, I was top lane. Okay. I lose a lot with Lucian too, if you haven't noticed. It'd be interesting to count up Lucian as well. We're going to look at Ezreal first, then I'll look at Lucian. I'm just curious to see this. Well, there's some wins with Lucian there. I'm probably about 50-50 with Lucian. Lucian's just such a crazy pick. Let me see. Now, sometimes I do lose against Ezreal. 0-3. That's a flex. I'm not going to count that. That's a flex. Whatever. I'll count it, but it is flex. So 1-3. That's when I got placed top. Okay. So I'm 1-3 with Ezreal. So I only have a 25% win rate with Ezreal. Now, champions from my tier list. So champions that I consider actually good. So top champions. I had, let's see, Draven. Well, let's just go, let's say Draven, Twitch, Caitlyn, and Kalista. Draven, Twitch, Caitlyn, and Kalista. Let's see how many games I win if I have a Draven, Twitch, Caitlyn, or Kalista on my team when I'm the support. Zyra was on my list too, who's a new one. Zyra was also a top 5. So we'll count Zyra also. So she's a top 5er. Although she's kind of low. I don't know. We'll count her. Okay, so that's 1-0. Nah, I don't want to count her. I don't want to count her because she's not a top 3 or 4. People are still learning her. I want the things that are really good, like the top 3. So let's just count Draven, Twitch, Kate. That's all I want. Draven, Twitch, Kate. Okay, so we haven't seen any yet. None here. So just the top 3 from my tier list. One zero. Don't see a lot of them. 2-0. 3-0. So I'm 3-0 with Caitlin. 4-0 with Caitlin. 1-4. I did win one with that. I got that win with Ezra there. Uh, 5-1. 6-1. 7-1. All right, so this is why champion select matters a lot. Like, this is why tier lists matter a lot. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit, why, like, your picks matter. But I'm 7-1 when I have a top 3, what I consider to be a top 3 AD carry on my team. Hi. So I win 88% of the games when I have a top 3 AD carry on my team over the last 20 games.
Booyah.
What's up? That's right. What's up? Okay.
You obviously have not looked at your phone in the last 6 hours.
Probably not.
8 hours.
You trying to text me or something? I don't even know where my phone is.
Awesome.
Okay. Well,
We had an appointment. You missed it.
What appointment?
We had an appointment to look at the pediatrician's office.
Oh.
And you missed it.
Oh no.
Yep.
Oh well.
Your voicemail box is full.
Well, I don't know where my phone is.
So I can't leave you a voicemail.
Well, was it a cool office?
It was. They had a soda fountain and a chocolate fondue fountain and a ball pit and a no, it was fine. It's in Jungle Jim's Plaza.
I see.
So it's cool.
I see.
Is your phone on silent?
I don't know where it is. I'll have to look it up in a second. Let me finish this and then we can get something to eat or something. But let me see just really quickly while I'm at this, since I've started down this path. Okay, so I'm 88% when I have a top 3 AD carry on my team, according to my tier list. Now, and I haven't done these numbers before. I'm not just like pulling these out of thin air here. I'm just looking. Now, let's see the best AD carry that all of the Illuminati sites say, all of the YouTube all cap sites. Let's see how often I win with Lucian. So you looked at Ezreal. I was 1-4 with Ezreal, I believe, right? 1-4. That's actually a 20% win rate. That's only when I'm support. Okay, 0-1. 0-2. 0-3. 1-3. 2-3. 3-3. 3-4. 3-5. Wait, where am I? Oh, I'm up there. 3-5. 3-6. 3-6. Okay, so I win 33% of the time. I'm gonna mark that down right here. Okay, so we've got, before I forget, That is staggering. Okay? Like, this is why I tell you, like, yes, I do play champions that are really good with Draven, Twitch, and Kate, but that's because those are the best champions, like, right now. Those are the best AD carries, and I play the best supports that are the best with those champions. I'm not sure where I could put that information in there, but, I think that was 20 games. That might have been more than 20 games. I don't know how many this is. It might be 40 games. That is 40 games that are open here. Okay. So that's a pretty large sample size. Okay. So that's why, like, you might want to ban Ezreal, because statistically, if I get an Ezreal on my team, I have a 20% win rate right now to win the game. Now, that's over several games. Now, that's not a huge sample size. It's 5 games, but I guarantee you if we dug back even further, if we looked at the last 200 games, it would probably be very similar. The guy just has a lot of problems in solo queue right now. I talk about it in my tier list video, but this is why sometimes if there is a champion that's as popular as Ezreal is, and you have a low win rate with that champion, then you might want to consider banning it. Or Lucian. I mean, Lucian is another decent consideration here, because he has such a low win rate. But yeah, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Okay, so sometimes there, might be a scenario where you want to ban certain champions that are good against your compositions, or certain champions that you don't want to see on your team. But most of the time, you should just stick with this. But I just thought that was an interesting aside, because I meant to put that in the video. I just forgot about it and couldn't remember where. So I think it's interesting to just go ahead and pull that through. That only took a few minutes. Jeez, that's already been 40 minutes. Holy cow. Okay, I gotta pick this up a little bit. Okay, so ban champions that are good against your comp. This is kind of a similar theory. So if everyone hovers their picks, you might be able to ban out things. So if and you have good game knowledge. So for example, if your team wants to run like Ashe, Leona, Lux or something like that, maybe you ban Tahm Kench, or Morgana, but it's unlikely. A lot of times you're not going to have information that's about stuff that's good against your comp. Now, if Riot ever, this is used in organized play a lot of times, but you can see this sometimes. You can kind of predict what the enemy might pick too. Like if they ban out something that's a really hard counter to something else. So if they have first pick, or not necessarily a really hard counter, but if they have first pick and they ban out like Soraka or something like that, there's a pretty high probability that they might pick Janna or Lulu, because Soraka is good against both those champions. If Riot ever implements the 10 ban system, then this might become a more popular strategy, but overall it's not going to be that important in theory. Okay. You could also ban a champion that your opponent plays well. So a lot of times you won't know what they play because it's solo queue. This is used in pro play, but not solo queue. But if someone is on your team and they're just like, I one trick Graves or what's something that someone could one trick and be really good on? Like I'll one trick Fiora, I've got 1,000 games, or someone on your team's like, I'll one trick Thresh, and then there's a dodge, and then you stay in the queue, and that guy's not on your team anymore. Like, that Thresh with 2,000 games is not on your team anymore. There's a good chance he's on the other team. If he's not the one that dodged. So then you could tell your team, hey, ban Thresh. They probably have a really good Thresh player over there. So there are limited cases where you can do that. Now, I talk about this, and I didn't mention it, I didn't write it down on the Google Doc, but I'll just say it here right now. If someone dodges, you need to wait for that reason. Because let's say that you have a one-trick Fiora on your team, right? She's got, 2,000 Fiora games at 53% or something like that. And let's say that your jungler dodges. Maybe they really wanted to play Master Yi, enemy bans Master Yi, so they just go ahead and dodge because they're a one-trick Yi player. Alright, so if you stay in queue and your AD carry goes over to that enemy team and everyone else on your team is the same, and that AD carry says, hey, ban Fiora because they have a one-trick Fiora on their team, and Fiora gets banned, then that player's not going to play as well. And in fact, they might get really tilted because they banned out that player's champion, probably because they knew that he wanted that champion. So that's going to make that person really mad. And so that's why you want to dodge, or not dodge, but stay out of the queue if someone dodges. Don't go back in. Another reason is if, let's say someone on the enemy team just randomly dodges. If you stay in queue, you might figure out why that person dodged. There might be someone on the enemy team who was raging out. Maybe they've lost 10 in a row, and they're just like, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to deliberately tank this game. I don't care. It's my Smurf. I'm just going to tank it. Then you get stuck with that, and now you have to dodge. Because you might get put over on that team, or they might get pushed over to your team. So this is why you want to just start fresh. Do not stay in the queue if someone dodges, because once again, they might ban out something that your team wanted to play, or there might be a big troll on the enemy team and you just don't know about it, and they end up being on your team. So just wait an extra, 30 seconds if someone dodges and then re-queue. I know it takes more time, but statistically, you'll win more games if you do that. Okay, so that's kind of the theory behind various bans and why you should ban them. That section was definitely longer than I wanted it to be, but we'll move forward and we'll see if we can keep this video, we'll try to keep it to about an hour and 15 minutes or so. But yeah, it's just really important to understand why to ban things, because a lot of people don't go into that. Okay, so similarly, let's go ahead and talk about respecting pick positions. So you want to use ban theory to inform your selection process. So you want to pick things if you're a high priority pick, or just in general, you want to pick things that are useful in many compositions, things that are uniquely powerful, so stuff that doesn't have a comparable replacement. You want to pick very high scaling champions, insurance for long games. You want to pick champions that have very few counters to them, so things that don't get completely hosed by their champions. You want to pick things that are popular, potentially, that are also all of these things. So very powerful stuff that's popular is a good thing to pick, because then you're denying a pick from the enemy. So if you, early pick a Twitch, you're denying the enemy from picking Twitch. Or if you early pick Ivern, you're denying the enemy from picking Ivern. And a reasonable skill level. So this is one that I know is not the most sexy, but it's just the truth. If you want to win games, you need to play something that you can actually perform well on. So even if you love playing Thresh a lot, if you're just consistently missing hooks or missing flays, or just going in at the wrong time, you need to just not play Thresh in ranked. Just save him for solo or for normal games. He's a lot of fun, but if you're serious about gaining elo, then don't play him in ranked. So, and not only just a reasonable, skill level for your for you personally, but a reasonable skill level for your team. This is something that holds back someone like Bard potentially, is that your team just might not be able to play around Bard. Like if every time you go to roam to pick up chimes, your AD carry dies because they don't know how to back up, even though you're telling them you're roaming and you're pinging them back, then you can't play it. Or, if no one follows up on your Bard ult, or if no one knows what your W does and they never step on it to heal. I mean, this was a huge thing with Malzahar. With me earlier in the season, I loved playing Malzahar back in January and December. He was a lot of fun. He was very powerful, and I knew he was going to get picked in pro play. I called it, like a month before. And then, of course, he's a very highly contested pick in pro play. So I was on it with that one, and he was very good. But I started off the season playing him a lot, and I lost a lot of games. And the reason is he was inappropriate for my elo. So I was placed in Gold 2 early in the season, and I ended up losing a lot of early games. I think I went 6-4 in the promos, or in my placement games. And then I played a lot of Malzahar early and lost some early games. And I was getting paired with people that were low gold and silver. at one point, even when I was gold 2, even when I moved up to like platinum 4, which we'll talk about here in a second about the elo and the ranking system. But I couldn't roam with Malzahar, and that's one of the main reasons you would play Malzahar, is to roam middle and get picks, get kills. I mean, you can get kills in your lane, but you know, roaming was also a huge part of his kit, and I couldn't do that because my AD carry just kept dying bottom. Like, there was one game in particular where I roamed middle, got twice, and got 2 kills middle, and the mid laner was up a ton of CS, and my bottom lane was complaining. They were saying something along the lines of, I'm about to AFK, I've been 2v1ing this entire lane. And I looked at the CS score, and he had the same CS. It was like 100 to like 97 or something CS bottom lane. So he literally had not fallen behind at all. He had the same amount of CS, and I got 2 kills middle. And I told him this. I'm like, we got 2 kills middle, man. This is good. You have the same amount of CS. You're doing great down there. Like, I said it in a positive way. He's like, I don't care. Didn't care. He just wasn't having fun bottom lane because I was getting kills middle on a very susceptible middle. I think it was like a Twisted Fate or something middle against like a Talon or something. I don't remember the exact matchup, but it was very, very vulnerable to getting ganked. So even though Malzahar is not a very high skill cap champion, in general, the fact that he requires a lot of roaming means that I shouldn't play him at lower elos because my team just can't play around it. So it's unreasonable for me to... I just shouldn't pick a roaming champion in low elos because people just die. In lower elos. So that's why you can see him in pro play, because people play around the roaming, and people follow up. That's another thing. People never followed up on ults. They would just sit there, watch me ult, watch me die. A lot of the times. So... you know, it wasn't a reasonable skill level for my team. So I had to back off of those picks, even though I thought he was good. I thought he was useful in a lot of compositions. I thought he was very unique and powerful with his ultimate, and how much damage his minions did at that time was insane. He had really nice scaling because of his minions. There weren't very many counters. There were some, but people weren't playing them. Like, Lulu's good against him, Janna's good against him, but very few people were playing these at the time. He wasn't very popular, so that was a strike against him. And he didn't have, it was just the skill level thing. I just couldn't do it. My team just didn't have the skill to play a Malzahar comp. Alright? So you want to keep in mind also, like, you want to do this when you're picking a champion, but keep in mind that if you're a higher priority pick, you have to pick safer champions. You have to pick champions that are all of these things. A lot. So you cannot pick risky picks, first pick. So there might be something. So you might be a really wonderful Sona player, and you might love Sona. She might be your favorite champion. But over time, if you pick her first pick, you're going to run into some problems because there's a lot of things that can counter her. Blitzcrank's really good against her. Leona's really good against her. Divers like Hecarim, Echo, Cassidon, all of these things are very good against her. So she has a lot of problems. But, and we'll talk about this here in a second, if you're like 5th pick and they don't have a lot of divers and you really want to play a Sona, let's say you have a Misfortune and an Amumu on your team, and just having a good AoE team comp would be helpful, then you could pick her. But if you're first pick, it should limit your champion pool a lot. So in theory, if you think about it, if you have no information about either team or very, very limited information, and you need to pick a champion that's safe, that should be the same champion almost every single time. Whoever you decide that is. For me, that's Janna right now. You know, that had been Zyra. In a lot of January, February, and some of March, it was Zyra. But there should, because the variables haven't changed, right? So if you don't know anything about either comp, or there's very, very limited information, like maybe one person is hovering a very generic pick, you know, like maybe they're hovering a Nivea, or maybe the enemy locked in, I don't know, Graves, or they locked in Lee Sin, you know, just some kind of generic pick where there's not a lot of counter picks to them. You should be picking just your universal pick. So that's what I'm kind of up here. I'm talking about kind of universal bans. There should also be universal picks. So if your first pick, it should be very similar, because why would you change it? Like, the information is the same every time, and that's that there is no information. So, you know, you shouldn't be changing up your first picks unless you just feel like it on a whim. But statistically, you should think carefully about who is your safe universal pick that you can pick into any comp, and then that's, you know, what you should pick. So if Lulu is not banned, I think Lulu is the best universal pick right now because she's meets all of these things. She's super powerful, and she's good into most compositions. Janna is the other one. So very good into almost anything. There's virtually no counterplay to Janna. She's popular. She has a very reasonable skill level if you practice her a lot. She's good with a lot of different play styles. She's good if your AD carry's passive. She's good if your AD carry wants to fight in lane. She has a lot of unique aspects to her that make her very powerful. Really high scaling, one of the highest scaling supports in the game. She just has everything going on. So the replacement for Janna is Karma because of lane pressure and winning lanes and the importance of winning lanes in high elo, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But these would be like your 3 picks, I think, that are safe. And this, think about it, if you watch pro play, this happens all the time too. When people are when they have to pick their mid laner and they don't know who the other mid laner is, a lot of times they'll pick something like Orianna because Orianna is safe into almost anything. She's very defensive. She's good in almost any composition. And she just doesn't lose most matchups in the middle lane. Like, she's not going to completely dominate and like win a game a lot of times, but she's safe. She's easy. Same thing if they pick a support early, often. If it's not Lulu, or I don't think they're probably going to pick Malzahar anymore. But if it's not Lulu, you know, a lot of times it's going to be something like Karma. Or if people early pick an AD carry, you know, they might pick something like Ezreal in pro play early because he's super safe. They might also pick Ashe if they really want that engage and initiate. Like, pro play is kind of its own thing, but in general, you want to pick things that are just good. Like, you very rarely will see someone like first pick Talon, for example. Like, maybe, but there's a lot of counterplay to Talon. Junglers are also very popular first picks or early picks in pro play because, you know, a lot of the top junglers do not have counters to them. Obviously, there's no lane opponent, so you don't have to worry about early game counters. Top lane's another one where typically you can play a tank, like you can just pick a Nautilus or just something like that, and you'll be okay in most lane matchups. Okay, so these are the best sort of blind pick. You don't know anything about either composition types of picks for solo queue right now, I believe. I mean, if you're really good with like Thresh, you might be able to throw Thresh in here. Thresh can be good in almost any composition. I'm trying to think if there are others. Rockin', like maybe like Jury's out or Rakan. Jury's out with him. But these would definitely be the 3 that I would lean on, and specifically Lulu and Janna. Okay. Now, if you are a lower pick, so if you're 4th or 5th pick, then it opens up choices for you. So as your pick goes lower, your choices go up because you have more information. Because you know what the enemy's going to do, you know what your allies are going to do, and so you don't have to play things necessarily that are useful in all compositions because you know the composition. Uniquely powerful and scaling are still important. But counterplay and compositions don't matter as much because they're much less likely to counter you if they only have 1 pick left, especially if your lane has been picked. So if they've already picked their AD carry and support, then it's much less likely you're going to get countered in lane. And you're going to have a lot more visibility about your team. So if it's something that is really, and the enemy team. So if it's something that's really good against the enemy team, so, you know, for example, if you pick Tom Kench into Leona, or you pick Soraka into Janna, and you know they don't have a lot of engage on their team, then it's a lot safer to do that. Popularity also doesn't matter because the enemy has picked a lot of stuff, so you don't have to try to take picks away from them. So if they've already picked their support, and you know, maybe Janna was available, and typically you would want to pick Janna not only because she's good on your team, but she's good to deny from the enemy, but maybe they pick I don't know, Tarek or something like that, and you want to be aggressive early on, then maybe you could pick a like a Zyra or something to punish him early in lane because you know they're not going to pick Janna. So you don't have to worry because they've already picked their support. So you don't have to worry about counters, popularity, and the usefulness as much as it goes down the pick orders. That opens up different picks for you. So, for example, Soraka's not a great first pick because there's lots of counter picks to her. But if your fourth pick and the enemy doesn't have a lot of engage and burst, then Soraka can be very good at countering low damage teams. So if they have like a bunch of tanks on their team and a lot of them don't have a lot of heavy burst damage or engage, then Soraka can be very good. She's great with tanks. So she's going to be an all-star in 7.9, I think. I don't know if she's going to supplant Lulu and Janna, but she's certainly going to be very good. Okay, now you can also pick niche picks. So if you're fourth or fifth pick, you can pick those pocket picks that are really good but could potentially be countered. So, you know, for example, you might want to pick Rakan over Janna as a fourth or fifth pick if you know the enemy team is not going to pick Janna, and if you know that you have a Zyra on your team and you want to give her that extra bonus, then that would be a good pick. Or you might want to go Nautilus over Janna if you know that your team doesn't have any engage and you need some engage to get the enemy Kog'Maw. Or if your enemy team has 4 AD champions and you have no AP on your team, you just might have to pick Zyra just to try to stop them from building all armor. So even though Zyra might have a hard time if they have an assassin, it might be something that you just have to do because your team needs some kind of magic damage. And yeah, I mentioned Tahm Kench earlier. He's like the ultimate niche pick. He's such an all-star if they have a lot of hard engage, like a Leona, Morgana, Nautilus. But he's a real turkey if they don't have a lot of engage and they have a lot of sustained like damage. So if they have like a Fiora, Hecarim, Riven, really high range stuff like a Twitch or a Kog'Maw that you need to get on, then he could be a relatively weak pick. Okay, so one thing you can also do to improve your overall composition is try to switch with allies. So see if you can get the kind of pick that you want if you want to move up the pick order, or if you want to move down the pick order and get a counter pick, or you want to give your ally something that's really overpowered, then that's a good option. So 3 reasons you might switch. You might switch for a ban theory pick that I just talked about. So, you know, if Lulu is up, you might tell your first pick, hey, if you have Lulu, pick it for me, and I'll get whatever champion you want later. And if they're a mid laner, maybe they want to do that, because Lulu is a good, safe pick, as we just described, because there's not a lot of counterplay to her, and she's universally powerful. And maybe the mid laner, you know, really wants to play something like an Echo or a Twisted Fate, but he's afraid that he's going to get countered. So then that would be a good switch, because then he gets a lower pick, so that he could potentially counterpick, or he can get some more visibility, and you get a higher pick so you can get one of the OPs. That's a perfect chance to switch. Or if one of your people on your team wants to play some really obscure champion, but is afraid they're going to get counterpicked, so like, or not even necessarily super obscure, but let's say they want to play Singed top. They have 2,000 Singed games, all they play is Singed. He's a very rare pick, so you don't have to worry about the enemy picking him. Then you might say, hey man, you know, grab me Janna early, and then I'll grab you Singed. And then that way they won't counterpick him as much. You know, maybe they won't pick whatever, Teemo or Darius or something like that into him. So that's just a good opportunity to try to switch with allies if, you know, some of those situations could apply. And we're good on time. I always sped it up a little bit. We could still go faster. Okay, so this is probably the coolest thing. Like, this stuff you might have known about some of this. Hopefully this helps you put a bit more thought into it and why it's so important to think about picks and priorities. But now I want to talk about dodging. So this is something that virtually nobody talks about on YouTube ever. I've never seen any content on dodging. And most people look at dodging as, you know, cowardice in a sense. Like, why are you dodging? You should just play that champion. You should play no matter what, right? And a lot of challenger level players will never dodge on stream, and there's several reasons for this. Number one, most of them don't care what their rank is if they're on stream, because the challenger level streamers are typically, they have tons and tons of viewers. So like I'm a Cutie Pie, for example, is probably never going to dodge because he makes a lot of money off of his viewers, and he doesn't really care that much about his elo. He's established, right? Like, He already has a following. You know, his prowess is unquestioned by most reasonable people, right? He's a very good player. He has a very successful channel. All right, and he doesn't care if he gets number 1. Like, he would like to get it, I'm sure, but it's more important for him to keep his stream going, so to please his viewers, than to get number 1. So, you know, and if you're a challenger, remember that queue times in challenger games are really long. So I don't know exactly what his queue time is. I don't watch his live streams. I watch his YouTube channel. He's great. I like I'm a Cutie Pie. So go watch him. He's awesome. But I would imagine his queue times are probably at least 15 minutes. So if he dodges, it's not only a 5-minute dodge for his first dodge, but it's an additional 15 minutes that his fans would have to wait for him to play. Now, he does have Smurfs, so I don't know. Maybe he does dodge more than I say. If you have Smurfs, then dodging is even a better deal. But some of these people, you know, they'll just play through it because it'll be entertaining or whatever. So their primary goal, if they're not dodging, is for entertainment, typically. That's why you don't see it a lot. But if your primary goal is to gain elo, if you're serious about gaining, I mean, he may just not know this. I'm sure he probably does know that dodges are beneficial. But if your primary goal is to gain a lot of elo to get the highest rank you can possibly get, then you should dodge a lot. Not like, you know, 10 times a day, but you should use your first dodge every single day. Somewhere you should use your first dodge. Your second dodge is a little more dicey. And so what we're going to get into here is the probability. So we're going to be thinking of statistics, and we're going to be thinking of when you should dodge, when are you actually benefiting yourself by dodging. And so kind of the TLDR is you should use your first dodge in most situations every day if you have a 40% or less chance to win. And you should use your second dodge if you have a 25% chance or less to win. And we'll talk about ways that you could try to calculate that. And I'm going to just kind of justify why that works. Okay, so let's go on into it. This is unique and interesting. This was a lot of fun for me to do this section, and I think it's really going to open some eyes out there. So if you have some friends that would really like to know about this, that don't know a lot about dodging or don't know a lot about Champion Select, point them this way. So even if you don't want to watch the first hour, you know, about the Champion Select or whatever, the ban theory, then at least watch this dodge section, I think, because it's really good. I think it's really good. It's a lot of unique information you just can't find elsewhere. Okay, so dodging a game, how dodges work. If you're new to the game or you've never thought about dodging, a dodge is when you exit out of Champion Select before it completes. So if you close the game or you just press X, it'll ask you if you want to dodge. You say yes, that's a dodge. Okay, so what happens when you dodge? So if you dodge a game, then you lose league points, LP, but you do not lose hidden MMR. So I'm not going to go into huge depth about what hidden MMR is, but basically hidden MMR is true elo. So that's what is actually determining your matchmaking rating. That's what it stands for. So that's what actually determines the champions, or the players that you're playing against, rather. So, and no one knows what this number is other than Riot. You need to understand that. No one knows this exact number. No website knows this number, okay? So like op.gg will give you an estimation. If you click on solo MMR, this is an estimation. The average MMR for Platinum 2, 75 LP is 1943, okay? I'm 1938. So we had a rough day. We were Platinum 1, but we lost a lot, okay? We lost a lot. You know, 2 of our last, or 8 of our last 10. We've only won 2 of our last 10. Okay. But we were on a hot streak, as you can see. I'm still 61% Janna over the last 20. But anyways, we'll move on. That's a different story. But this is not your exact LP. This is an estimation. So they do not know your exact MMR rating. It is an estimation. So, and Riot will not tell you what this is. Now, it's debatable whether or not they should have done this. They made this change, I think, in Season 3, because you used to just have a flat ELO number. It might have been Season 2. Like, you used to just have a number that was something like 1510. That was your exact rating. Like, you would start with 1200, and then if you got to, I think, 1400, that was silver ranking. There were no, like, 1 through 5 divisions. It was just, are you silver, are you gold? That was it. Silver, gold, platinum, and diamond. That's all they had in Season 1. So it used to be like 1200 MMR, which they just called ELO back then. 1200 ELO was where you started. Anything that was below 1400 was bronze. 1400 is where you got to silver. Once you got to 1515, that was gold. And then once you got to 1850, that was platinum. And then I believe that 2100 was diamond. It was either 2100 or 2200 was diamond. And they did this statistically, like they just made it a bell curve. So it was something like they wanted the top 1% to be diamond, they wanted the top 3% to be platinum, they wanted the top, 10% to be gold, and so on and so forth. So that's just the arbitrary numbers they came up with in season 1. Okay, but this is different. So your LP is the visible number, but that is not your matchmaking rating. That number still exists, and it's still in use. So somewhere floating out there in the ether, you still have a number that's something like 1575 as an ELO rating. But they won't tell you what that is behind the scenes. But that determines who you're getting matched with. So you could have a 1555, ELO, and you're probably going to get matched with other people that are within like 15 points. So you're going to get matched with other people that are 1555 or between 1570 and 1540. I don't know if it's exactly 15, but it's something like that. They try to match you very closely with other people with the same MMR. Now, this is what determines the quality of your games, okay, is your hidden MMR. So this is why sometimes you can have very lopsided matches. So I have had games this season where I was paired with a silver 3 support when I was platinum 4. And this is because my MMR was low at the time and their MMR was high for whatever reason. Now, whether or not it should be that way, once again, is debatable because I can't duo with someone who's silver when I'm platinum. But I was getting silvers in my games. So sometimes it just gets weird. And sometimes matchmaking just fails. It's not a perfect system. And sometimes there are just glitches or bugs with it. So it has to balance out the time that it's going to take to find a game versus the quality of that game, right? So if the closer the match, the longer it's going to take to find that game. So if you are silver 5, the average ELO, you're probably going to get matched with other people that are very close to your rank. But if you're challenger, this is why challengers will sometimes get matched with like a diamond 5, because there's only 200 challengers. And if 100 of them are just not on in the middle of the day because they have school, then it doesn't want you to have to wait, an hour for a game. Then it might match them with things like diamond 5s. So the spread is much, much wider as you go up in rank. The potential spread between people is much higher. Also, if you play at low traffic time, so like really late at night, there's not a lot of people on, and so there's a much higher probability that games are going to be more lopsided because it's just going to like pull people from lower matchmaking rating just to try to make a fair match. So even though you're platinum 4, it might put you in games with a bunch of gold 3s and gold 4s because there just aren't a lot of other people that are around platinum 4 that are on at that time, depending on, time of day and just who's on. So the thing to keep in mind here is that dodging a game does not affect your matchmaking rating. So you will lose some league points for it, but it does not affect your league, or it does not affect your hidden MMR. So this is important to note. That it's actually better than it appears down here. So I'm just going to look at strictly league points because we just can't know about MMR. But it is known, Riot has stated that dodging does not affect your MMR. So the situation is better than it looks when I talk about it down here. And it looks pretty good in terms of dodges. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Statistically, if you duo with someone who is ranked lower, you will lose more matchmaking rating if you lose the game, and you will gain less if you win the game. Now, your LP should be roughly the same, but your matchmaking rating is going to be hurt. And that's kind of the behind the scenes. So one reason last season, I believe, that I was getting matched with, when I was low to mid plat, I was getting matched with low golds for the longest time. And a big part of it was I had duoed a lot of games with my buddy who was gold 5 when I was platinum 5. And so we did okay, but even if you're winning and losing the same amount of games, if someone is much lower than you, you are losing MMR. Almost guaranteed you're losing MMR because you're going to be placed into games with lower ranking people. Now, they're going to be placing games with higher ranking people. It's going to try to average that out. But in general, unless you're winning a ton of games, like unless you're winning like 66% with this person or more, then you're probably going to be losing matchmaking rating, even if you're gaining LP over time, which seems kind of wonky, but that's how it works. So think very carefully before you duo with someone that is significantly lower than you. Now, if they're like 1 or 2 divisions, it's not going to be a big deal. But I'm talking about like, you know, someone who's Platinum 1 dueling with someone who's Gold 5, or someone who's Gold 1 dueling with someone that's Silver 5. You're potentially, you know, losing a lot of MMR if you do that. So if they're your buddy and you just want to duo with them, that's fine. But just know that you're probably going to take a hit to your matchmaking rating. So don't be confused if when you go play solo queue without your buddy and you keep getting matched with, if you do that, if you're like Gold 1 and you duo with a Silver 5, don't be confused if you get paired in your solo queue games with like Gold 5s or Silver 1s. Because even if your LP is the same, because you've tanked your MMR by doing that. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind, your stats in no way influence your MMR. This is something that I still hear people get wrong. It doesn't matter if you don't get any kills as support. The only thing that affects your matchmaking rating is if you win the game. It doesn't matter if you get kills. It doesn't matter how many assists you have. It doesn't matter if you died 20 times in the game and you win the game versus if you got 20 kills in the game and you win the game. It does not matter. Your ranking at the end does not matter. That's just for funsies, okay? So when you get an S in a game versus when you get an F in a game, it does not influence your MMR. That's just for fun. It's a separate system. So, you know, don't think that, oh man, you know, I can't play Janna because, you know, I never get an S with Janna. I always get A's no matter how well I do, and I never get any kills, and I never get any gold. So I just can't play Janna because it's hurting me on my climb. No, it's not. The only thing that matters is whether or not you win. That's it. Now, like I said, it can fluctuate depending on the people you're playing with, especially if you duo, but that's only dependent on wins. That's not dependent on anything that goes on in the game. It's just win or not win. Okay, so let's get into the meat of dodging here. Okay, so a dodge, if someone dodges, that's leaving the game before champion select completes, the penalties for dodging are you lose 3 LP, no MMR, but you lose 3 LP, and you get a 5-minute timeout on your first dodge within 16 hours. Okay, your dodge timer resets every 16 hours. Your second dodge, you lose 10 league points, and it's a 30-minute timeout. So that means you cannot play a game of League on that account for 30 minutes after you dodge. This is so that people don't dodge all the time. This used to not be a thing. It used to always be 5 minutes, but then there were so many dodges that it just took forever to play a game. So you don't want your entire community dodging all the time or just no one's ever going to get a game. So this is what they've come up with over the years, and it's a decent balance. I think 30 minutes is a pretty long time. I wish they'd do like 15 or something for your second dodge, but whatever. Okay? Now, if you log on to a Smurf or another account, then you can keep playing. But you can't, if you get a 30-minute timeout in your solo queue, you can't play normals, you can't play flex queue. I don't even think you can play ARAM. I think you're timed out of all games for 30 minutes. And I believe if you dodge a normal game, then that affects your ranked dodge. So if you dodge 2 normal games, then you're also timed out for 30 minutes for playing ranked. Now, it doesn't affect your LP, but it will also lock you out of ranked. So just keep that in mind when you're going to dodge. So this is why I don't dodge my second dodge on stream a lot, because I don't want a 30-minute timeout. Sorry, I hit the camera, probably freaked out there. I don't want a 30-minute timeout because I don't want my fans to wait 30 minutes for me. But if you're just playing by yourself at home and you can just go take a walk or go get some dinner or just like watch a funny video or something for 30 minutes, or, you know, just do something else, do some homework for 30 minutes, anything.
Strategy Professor videos.
Yeah, watch Strategy Professor videos. That's what Sandra said. That's right. If you just watch some Strategy Professor videos in the meantime, then that's a win. So you should be using that second dodge if the situation calls for it, and we'll talk about situations that call for it here in just a minute or two. Okay, so you should use your first dodge of the day every single day, okay? So as long as you're playing one other game per day, like don't dodge and then not play a game, although that still is going to be helpful, but you should be using it every day. So I've got some math here for you, so look at this. Okay, so your dodge is a very valuable resource that gives you a statistical edge. So assume that you're gaining or losing 20 LP per game. This is the average. Now, there might be different situations, which we'll talk about here in a second, but this is the average person who is placed where they should be placed. They're kind of even, 50-50. Their MMR is roughly equal to their league points right now in terms of like how that correlates. Is 20 LP per game. So your first dodge, you lose 3 LP. All right, so if you have a 40% chance to win a game, we'll talk about how you can try to calculate this here in a second. But let's say you have a 40% chance to win a game, then you're going to lose 4 LP on average every time you would play that game, statistically. So 4 wins would give you 80 LP, 20 LP per. 6 losses would give you minus 120 LP, so 6 times 20. The total is going to be negative 40 LP. After the 10 games that you played here. So that's 10 games. So that's negative 4 LP on average per game that you would lose. All right. So if you dodge that game, so if you have a 40% chance to win and you dodge, you're actually saving yourself 1 LP. Let that sink in. You're saving yourself 1 LP. So by dodging that game that you have a 40% win rate of, you're actually gaining 1 LP in effect. Because if you played it, you would lose 4. You're dodging it, so you lose 3, so you're actually gaining 1. That doesn't sound like a big deal, right? And the amount of LP that you're preserving, however, increases as your win percentage goes down. So you lose 10 LP if, on average, you have a 25% win rate. You can do the same math there. I did it on my own, kind of off screen. I didn't want to clutter it up too much, but that's how it works. You lose 10 LP in that same scenario if you're gaining 20, losing 20, at 25% win rate. So you should dodge a game with your second dodge if you have less than a 25% chance of winning the game. Then you're going to be preserving ELO. So if you play League 200 times per year, like I talked about earlier, 200 days per year, which is roughly, about 4 days per week, and you dodge 1 40% game 1 time per day, you would gain 200 LP because you're saving 1 LP per day that you dodge, a 40%er, and 200 days, that's 200 LP. So by the end of the season, 200 LP is roughly 2 divisions, not including promotion games, but just for the sake of easy comparison, it's 200 LP is 2 divisions. So that could be the difference between finishing the season in Silver 2 or Gold 5, or even finishing Platinum 2 to Diamond 5. So it's a very big deal. So 1 LP does not sound like a big deal, but over time, over the course of an entire season, that adds up to be a big deal. So the number of games does not matter. Even if you only play like 2 games a day or something like that, if you still get that dodge off every day and save yourself 1 LP, you will still get 200 LP by the end. So you don't have to be someone that plays 10 games a day to benefit from this. Even if you only play a couple games a day, even if you just play 1 game per day, you could benefit from this. So that's very powerful. Now, when you're doing these stats, it's important to remember that a loss negates a win. So if you win 9 games, you're not going to gain 18 LP, which is 90%. You're going to gain 16 LP, which is 80%, because that loss cancels out some of the gain. Okay? So just keep that in mind as you're looking at it statistically. If you do the math, that's how it works out. All right? So this changes a little bit depending on how much LP you're getting. So you should dodge less if you're gaining more LP than you're losing. So if you're doing really well, if you're gaining a lot of LP, let's say you're on like a 20-game win streak, or it's really early, you just got placed on your Smurf, and you're still getting, like 30 LP per win or something like that. If we assume that you're gaining 15 LP and losing, or you're gaining 25 and losing 15, which means that you're winning a lot, and that's based on your MMR. So if your MMR is much higher than your LP using their hidden formula, then you're going to be gaining a lot more LP than you're losing. And so you're going to gain more on wins, and you're going to lose less on losses. If your MMR is far lower than what your LP is reflecting, then it'll be the second scenario we'll talk about here in a second. But if you have 4 wins, you're going to get 100 LP, 4 times 25. You have 6 losses. You're going to lose 90 LP. So 6 times 15. So your total gain is still 10 LP. So even with a 40% win rate, so you can just win 40% of your games, if this is your scenario, and you will still gain LP, 1 LP. So you should not dodge. So in the above scenario that I just described, you should dodge at 40%. But if you're gaining a lot of LP, you should not dodge at 40%. So if you're gaining way more than you're losing, do not dodge. Hardly ever. It has to be super bad for you to dodge. It has to be like, 20% chance to win or something like that. Well, not quite that low, but it has to be like, I think probably 35% chance to dodge. 35 or 30. Okay. However, you should dodge more games. What's up, dear?
Just using your big trash can.
I see.
How much longer you got?
20 minutes or so. Why? I mean, I kind of want to go, like, eat at Dewey's or something, but... Do what?
That's fine, we can do that.
There would be a bit of a wait. I wonder if we can call in.
Well, I wanted to run by the consignment store.
How far is the consignment store from Dewey's?
The consignment store is like 2 minutes from here. But I can't carry this big bin. If you're gonna be a while, I guess I could go and just carry like 3 things at a time.
Okay. Alright. So you should dodge more if you're losing more LP than you're gaining. So assume that you're gaining 15 and losing 25. So you're on a terrible loss streak. You've lost like 15 games in a row or something. If you win 4 games, you're only going to get 60 LP. If you lose 6, you're going to lose 150. So, your total loss is going to be minus 9 LP per. So you're going to lose 11 LP at 35%. So you should actually use your second dodge at a 35% win rate here. So instead of 25%, if even on your second dodge at minus 10, you should use it at a 35% win rate. Okay, so you should be using those dodges liberally if you're losing a lot of LP. If you're in a terrible loss streak, you need to dodge your way out of it, basically. If you are on a huge win streak, you need to probably let it ride and not dodge as much. Like, bring your threshold up just a little bit before your dodges. Okay, so that's the general gist of it. So dodging can actually save you a lot of ELO statistically over a period of a long time. But, the season is a long time, so you need to understand this and try to use your dodges. Okay, so thus the real question becomes, how do you determine your chance of success then? Okay, well, all these numbers are great, but how can you get to these numbers? And the answer is, there's not a perfect answer. Okay? So League is not a math formula per se. There is a lot of math that can inform your decisions in League, as I demonstrate constantly on the channel. But there's not going to be a perfect solution here. However, there are several theories that can estimate your chances of success. Now, a lot of people don't talk about this in terms of dodge, but you will hear people reference these theories. They won't call them what I call them, but they will use these concepts. And this is very common with analysts. So people who are trying to comment on the LCS, or people who are doing post-game commentary on the LCS, particularly people who are trying to predict outcomes. So, those people that are talking during Champion Select all the time, usually there's 2 or 3 of them, depending on the tournament. They're using these types of theories to estimate who's going to win overall. So to estimate who has the edge, oftentimes. So we're going to go through some of these. So they're not talking about it in terms of dodges, but they're talking about it in terms of chances of success. And they don't put a specific number on it, but I do my best to try to put a number on it. So those commentators use a combination of band theories, so thinking about bands, thinking about compositions, respecting pick position theory, and chance of success theory. Okay, so there are 3 major things that people try to use to estimate their chances of success. All right, so the first one is strong champion theory. This is one of the more common theories. So if each player accounts for a 20% chance of success for a team, so 1/5, 5 players, 20%, then a head-to-head comparison between roles might yield an estimation of success. So, for example, if you believe that your team has a stronger champion in 3 of the 5 positions on the map, then you may estimate that you have a 60% chance of winning that game. So if you only have 2 champions that are superior, then you only have a 40% chance of winning. So if you only have 2 champions that overpower the other champions on the enemy team, then you're sitting at about a 40% win rate, according to this theory. You're sitting at about a 40% chance of winning, and so you might want to consider using your 3 LP dodge, because you're at that 40% number, roughly. So, for example, let's say that, let's say the enemy team gets Lulu plus Draven plus Kassadin, or something like that. So let's say that enemy team gets Lulu, Draven, or Lulu, Twitch. Let's say Lulu, Twitch, Kassadin on the enemy team. And let's say that your team versus, let's say that your team has Ezreal, Janna bottom, and I don't know, Twisted Fate middle, or something like that. So that means that those 3 picks are in their favor, most likely. But then let's say that your team has, you know, something like Graves in the jungle against their Lee Sin, and maybe top lane you have Rumble against their Nautilus, something like that. Since they have 3 champions that overpower 3 of your champions, then using this theory, they would have a 60% chance to win the game. So you can use the ban theory that we talked about to try to measure this. So think about champions, like, is the champion high scaling? Is it useful in the composition? Is it uniquely powerful? Is there a low margin for error? So is it unlikely that someone's going to really goof up that champion? And so, like, once again, that's not an exact science. You're going to have to think about these things here. But if they have 3 really good picks against your 3 kind of average picks at different positions, and certainly 3 if you have really bad picks. So if it's like Ezreal into Draven, that's extremely bad. Then, you know, the measurements will be off. But this is kind of the general sort of theory you can use to think about this, the strong champion theory. However, there are some obvious problems with this. So, for example, it doesn't account for specific interactions between champions. So, for example, your team might have a Mundo against Rumble top. Well, Rumble is a higher priority on the ban theory. He's really high scaling. He's useful in a lot of comps. He's unique and powerful. He doesn't have a lot of counterplay. Pretty low margin for error. There's far more counters to Mundo, I think, than there are Rumble, typically. It depends on different situations. And Rumble typically scales better into team fights later in the game. But Mundo specifically is very good against Rumble. If you have an Annie against an Ahri. So Annie isn't as high of a priority, typically, using the ban theory as Ahri is. But she's really good against Ahri. So if you have very good counter picks, then that can throw some of this standard ban theory out the window. So they might have stronger champions on paper, but you might have very good counter picks, or you might have very good interactions. So if your team, you know, has something like Kennen, Misfortune, Sona, you know, in theory that may not be as good as some other champions, but in a team fight, if they all come together, then they might just be able to murder the rest of the team. So, you know, the strong pick theory doesn't really account for different interactions between other champions, but it can give you kind of a ballpark estimate that is flawed, but it's something that can give you sort of an idea about a probability that your team might win. Okay, another popular way of thinking about it is winning lane theory. So if a lane is winning, it's much more likely to win the game because it's more likely that they're going to gain an advantage over the opposition. So that's where this adage comes from that you might hear a lot: win lane, win game. However, I will put the caveat here that a lot of people don't fully understand what winning lane means. Okay, like a lot of people think winning lane means gold, right? So kills plus CS, that's part of the story, but that's not the entire story. So I do agree that winning lane is often the best, one of the best paths to winning game. Not always, but sometimes. Okay, so here are some of the ways that you can win a lane. All right, golden kills, that's the obvious one. So people get kills or they kill more creeps than the enemy. That's a very easy, quantifiable way to measure who's doing well in a lane. Pressure is another one that's underestimated. Okay? So putting damage on towers, taking towers, and being able to roam to pressure other lanes or to invade jungles or to get deep wards, all of this is also winning a lane. So even if... so let's say, who's a good pressure roamer? Let's say like TF is like a classic here. All right, so let's say it's TF against Twisted Fate against trying to think of someone who has like maybe Anivia. Twisted Fate against Anivia in the middle lane. And they each just keep pushing the lane and doing, you know, they have very similar creep score. But Twisted Fate teleports bottom and gets 2 kills. Or gets, let's just say he just gets 1 kill. Let's say he pushes in this lane and gets 1 kill and then comes back. Okay? Well, he didn't get a kill on Anivia, and they have the same creep score, but Twisted Fate now has an advantage because he was able to roam and push more. It doesn't even have to be kills sometimes. Let's just say that, let's take another example. Let's say that Echo keeps pushing in a Gangplank in the middle lane, right? So Echo just constantly pushes him in. Gangplank's constantly farming at tower. And just every time Echo pushes in, he starts roaming bottom. And, you know, maybe he roams to about the Dragon Pit. And let's say this Draven is trying to pressure out a Twitch bottom lane, right? They're trying to push him in. They want to get, you know, a lot of damage here. But let's say that Twitch is freezing the lane right here. So Twitch is keeping the creeps at about right here. Well, Draven sees this Echo running down the river, and so he has to back up. And so he's got to play back, which means he's going to miss creep scores here, which is going to give Twitch an advantage over time. So if Echo keeps pushing this lane in and keeps wandering down bottom, even if he never gets a kill, even if he never goes all the way bottom, even if he only runs to Dragon, then this is giving the bottom lane an advantage because they have to back off if they're smart. They have to back off and miss creeps because they could get killed. He doesn't even have to go there. If he just pushes in here and keeps locked out vision and just fades out of vision, bottom lane is still going to have to back up if they're smart because he could be coming. If they don't have vision in this river, they have to back up. Because we don't know where he could be. Because he keeps pushing into lane, he can use pink wards to control bushes. He can go in here and like invade the red. He can go invade the blue with the jungler. He could roam top lane. He could do any number of things. So that's a metric of winning the lane because he keeps pushing in and putting pressure on the towers, and that allows him to roam. So even if he doesn't necessarily get kills or go up in creep score a lot, he still is winning the lane because he's able to do other things on the map. So he's transitioning that advantage that he has here, which is lane momentum, into advantages elsewhere on the map. So that's a form of winning, even if he doesn't get kills off of it, and even if he doesn't get an advantage in creep scores, he's creating pressure around the map. And finally, another way of winning is scaling. So just picking champions that scale very well later into the game. That's a way of winning. So a lot of people overlook that. You know, if someone picks an Ezreal bottom, let's say someone does Ezreal Karma bottom, and the enemy picks, let's say that your team picks Ezreal Karma bottom, and the enemy picks Twitch Lulu. Even if Ezreal is up 15 CS at, you know, 8 minutes into a game, he's losing. He's lost that lane because he's not up enough. Because he's going to get outscaled. Because Twitch and Lulu are going to butcher him later in the game. Once that Twitch gets 1 or 2 items, it's lights out for poor Ezreal, unless Ezreal dramatically outplays the Twitch later on. He's losing the lane. And so, you know, sometimes people will play champions where they go up in CS in lane, and they might even get a kill or two. but they don't scale very well into the late game, and they'll complain about their team, or, you know, team's so bad, we can't win. Like, I won my lane so hard, why can't we win the game? Well, a big reason why is you didn't pick a champion that scales very well. So even if you're Pantheon top lane, and let's say you're playing against a Vladimir or something like that, you know, once he gets that advantage, once he starts getting to level 9 and starts picking up a couple of items, it's going to be really hard for you to do anything. And he's much more useful in team fights and later into the game than you are as Pantheon. So even if you kill him once or twice and you go up 20 or 30 CS, if your team doesn't close out the game before 25 minutes, you're going to lose because you're getting outscaled. So, you know, part of winning lane is picking a champion that scales well. And sometimes that means just playing defensively. So, you know, in that example with Karma Ezreal against Twitch Lulu, if you're the Twitch, you don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to be up in CS. You don't have to kill anybody in lane. All you have to do is try to stay as even as you can and just try not to die, and you're going to win because of scaling. You're going to win the lane. So a lot of people are mystified by this, you know, and they don't count this as winning, as scaling. They'll say, oh, well, you know, their team bailed them out later in the game, or they lost the lane but won the game. Did they? Did they lose? They did their mission. Like, they picked a scaling comp, and they succeeded in staying close enough to where they could scale later into the game. That's a win. You know, you call it what you want, but when you get a W at the end of the game, that's a win. So this is the example that I used. For example, you know, some ways of winning lanes, and not all ways of winning are equal, right? So all of them result in a W at the end, but you can get that W in different ways. So for example, Draven Lulu is going to win over Ezreal and Janna for 3 reasons. Draven's more than likely going to have better kill pressure and more creep score. Draven's going to push the Ezreal to tower, which means he can roam and make plays. And Draven's going to scale better than Ezreal at the end of the day. But Twitch and Janna will likely end up winning lane against a Lucian Karma, depending on the matchup, like how well that Lucian Karma plays the early game. I mean, Lucian's going to be up in CS, and he has more kill pressure. Lucian's going to push to tower, but Twitch is going to dramatically outscale Lucian, and Janna is going to dramatically outscale Karma later into the game. So unless this Lucian is up like 40 CS and a kill or 2, then he's going to lose to Twitch. So I would call that a winning lane. If I'm sitting here assessing like how many winning lanes does my team have, and I see Janna Twitch into Karma Lucian, I'm thinking that's a winning lane for the Janna Twitch. Because I'm betting that Lucian's not going to get far enough ahead to close out the game. So reasonable people can disagree about this. Some people may not classify that as a lane thing. They might say, well, you lost the lane but won game. But regardless of whatever you call it, my theory is one of the only theories here that can explain why Janna is so strong despite losing, by most metrics, virtually every lane in terms of golden pressure. So when Janna supports, often her ADC will potentially be down in CS. They're not going to get a lot of kills in lane, but they're going to win a lot of games. So I'm still 58% with Janna, even though we've had a rough stretch of it, after 230 games. And that's not an accident. Now, with Zyra, I was up a lot with Zyra. I've been down fairly recently, and she's one of those heavy kill pressure, heavy, like, heavy poke, heavy pressure, heavy kills. Your AD carry is probably going to get more CS because you can pressure the enemy off of CS. So this is a classic win lane champion, is Zyra, because she has a lot of pressure. But Janna is also a win lane champion because she scales so well later into the game. So this is why both of these champions, it seem like they're polar opposite in terms of how they approach the lane, can both have a really high win percentage because they win their lanes in different ways, but they both win their lanes a lot. And that's why you have a very high win percentage with them. That's why I do. And that's why I think that Janna can have a really high win percentage if played correctly. So that explains it. There's no other theory that explains why Janna wins. Like, everyone who says you have to win lane to win game, and winning lane means you have to get kills and more CS, is wrong. Like, there's a lot more to it. Or under that theory, Janna would have like a 40% win rate overall, which she doesn't. I think she still has a positive win rate and a really high pick rate. Let me see, what is it anyways? Let me see if it's going to show me the percentages here. Yeah, she's still hovering at 51%. Pick rate. Let me see what's pick rate here. Pharma, Blitz. Games at Platinum and higher. Wow, that's really high for Blitz. But she has a fairly high pick rate. Now, not as much. I didn't realize that Thresh and Lulu and Blitz were that popular. Like, that's crazy. I thought Janna was way more popular than that. But she still is clocking in at about a 52% win rate. Which is pretty good, considering how popular she is. Yeah. But that explains why she can win. So, if you subscribe to this theory, the winning lane theory, then each lane that you win is about a 33% chance to win the game. So, you know, if you have a mid lane and a top lane that are winning, that are going to be winning lanes according to your estimation, you know, thinking about, are they going to have enough of these three things to win? Are they going to be up in gold? Are they going to be up in pressure? And are they going to be up in scaling? If it's all three, it's almost always a grand slam. That's a winning game. If it's gold and pressure, it's probably a winning lane, but you have to see with scaling. If the scaling is heavy enough, then it might be a win. Now, GP is another example where GP scales very well later into the game, but he's going to go severely down, often in gold and kill pressure, and he's down overall in map pressure. Typically, GP won't run, like, he'll have to run exhaust so he doesn't get murdered in one-on-ones. And because he runs exhaust, he won't have teleport, which means he won't have as much pressure throughout the map. So GP is an example of pretty good scaling, but he also has really high skill cap. So GP, I would often consider a losing lane because he's very high skill cap. He's going to go down in gold, and he's going to go down in pressure. So he does scale, but I think it's not enough, typically, to justify him being a winning lane. So I would call him almost always a winning lane. Fizz, similarly, you know, he's going to be down gold and kill pressure. Typically, he's going to be pretty far down in pressure because he's going to get pushed in a tower. His scaling is high, but I'm of the persuasion that it's not high enough to justify that loss because there are other champions that also have really high scaling, like Kassadin, that aren't going to suffer as much. Now, Kassadin is going to probably be down in gold and CS, and he's probably going to be down in tower pressure, but his scaling is much, much higher. So just do some rough estimations. If you have two winning lanes, you probably have a 2/3 chance to win, 66%. If you only have one winning lane, you should consider a dodge because, you know, two of your lanes are going to lose. So, you know, once again, that's not an exact science because this doesn't take into account the jungler, right? So the jungler can dramatically influence whether a lane is going to win or lose. So if the jungler, you know, if GP is technically a losing lane, top lane against a Fiora, but, you know, a jungle Elise just keeps camping and killing that Fiora over and over again, then all of a sudden GP can be a winning lane and he's going to have a chance to scale and be very powerful later into the game. You know, even though Fizz has a hard time middle, if, you know, jungle Ivern just keeps coming middle and ganks for that Fizz and Fizz gets 2 or 3 kills, then all of a sudden he's won that lane and he gets to transition into the late game and start taking over. So, you know, this theory doesn't account for the jungler very well, but it's a decent estimation of, you know, once again, whether or not you should consider a dodge. So it's not exact science, but it is helpful. And this is why commentators will reference this a lot. They'll say, okay, that's a pushing lane or that's a winning lane. So they're probably going to win. And they'll tell you a lot. If a team has all losing lanes or at least 2 losing lanes, they'll say that team is not likely to win the game. And if you go and watch pro play and you think about these metrics, who's going to have more CS, who's going to have more pressure, and who's going to have more scaling, the team that has the winning lanes often wins the game. That's why someone like Karma is very, very popular in pro play, because she provides excellent pressure, and she has decent scaling later into the game, and she's going to give you an advantage early on with golden kills. That's why the early game and pressure is so important in pro play, but that's a different video. So the final thing that I want to talk about here is the experience theory, and I think this is the weakest indicator, but this is one that people probably use the most, along with strong champion theory. The winning lane theory requires a little bit more critical thinking. I don't think a lot of people think of that, but it's a good metric, even though it's flawed. This is the weakest of the three metrics, and I'm going to explain why. So the experience theory, basically what it boils down to is a lot of players believe that having tons of experience or a high win percentage on a champion yields the best chance for success. This is not always true. And this is the shakiest one. Like, I think that the winning lane theory and the champion select, the strong champion theory, are much better than this one. And the reason is, well, first of all, this informs the mantra that a lot of people say, well, people should just play what they're good with rather than playing meta champions. You hear that all the time, right? Well, just play whatever you're good with in bronze. It's fine. Anything can win. But then you find yourself in bronze for like 3 seasons in a row, and you're just like, man, not much has changed. Well, it's because you're subscribing too much to experience theory. So it is true to an extent, right? So players play better when they have experience on a champion. That part is true, right? That's true. I mean, you have more experience, you're going to play better on a champion. But it creates a false dichotomy. You can play ban theory champions, so you can play strong champions and have a lot of experience with them. I know it's a novel idea out there, but it is possible to actually play champions that are good a lot and get good experience on them. I mean, that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's kind of serious too, where, if you are, let me see some visuals of champions here. Let's say that you're just, trying to think of someone. You're an extremely good Skarner jungle, for example, right? Like, you've got 1,000 games as Skarner, and you've got, like a 53% win rate or something with Skarner. Like, that's good. You've got a lot of games with him. You're experienced with him. But just imagine if you had spent that 1,000 games, like part of those 1,000, learning how to play Graves over the last half a year. Or learning how to play Ivern, basically since his release. Or, if you're an AD carry and you're an Urgot specialist and you're just like super good with Urgot, right? Like you're 54% with Urgot. Just imagine if you had spent those 2,000 games mastering Urgot playing something like Caitlyn, who's classically a really good champion, or Twitch is good in a lot of metas, often. Caitlyn's probably the classic champ. Like, if you want a one-trick, an AD carry, it should be Caitlyn, because she's almost always relevant in every single meta, no matter what's happening. She's still good. Even in the lethality meta, she was still pretty good, because she just has lots of qualities about her that make her very good. Twitch is almost always relevant in solo queue, if you're good with Twitch. Just because of the way that he scales and because of the way that invisibility functions in solo queue. So, take that for whatever it's worth. So I'm not saying you can't have pet champions that are really fun, that you really enjoy playing. That's awesome. I want people to do it. I have really fun pet champions that I like too. For example, I really love Tom Kinch, but I can't play him right now if I'm serious about gaining elo, because there aren't a lot of good situations for him. There are some, and I do play him if those situations arise. If there's like a Leona on the enemy team, or an Ashe, or sometimes a Thresh, I can play him. And I have a lot of experience on him, right? Like last season, he was my most played champion. Someone told me at one point last season, I was like the 400th Tom Kinch in the world. I think that's probably fallen because I've lost more this season with him, but I had to put him on the shelf and he'll come back out. He might come out with the tanks come back. But I had to put him on the shelf if I'm serious about climbing, and, just tuck him away for a rainy day. I will dust him off again, like I said, but even though I have a lot of experience, he's just not a powerful champion right now. So I've had to adjust and play other things. So that's just, if you're serious about gaining elo, you need to be honest with yourself and honest about the meta and think critically. And even if your pet champion that you love to play is not good in a current meta and you want to win, you might have to play something else, right? So just save your favorite champion for normals. Play it with your friends in normals. Go solo queue normal games like unranked. I mean, if you don't care about your rank, fine, play it in ranked. But you can't go into ranked and try to one-trick something that's not good in a current meta, that's not optimal, I should say, and be upset that you lose. You can't have it both ways. Either you're cool with losing elo, or just kind of treading water and not gaining a lot of elo, or, and you play that champion, your favorite champion, or you play something that's really good in a current meta, and you practice it a lot, and you get experience on that champion. You get experience on the stuff that's good in the current meta. And you win. So that's how it is. You can get experience on good champions, and you should get experience on good champions in a certain meta, and you should be willing to adapt and change. So some of these statistics can be misleading. So some people come in and they're like, oh, you know, I've got an 80% win rate on Braum, or, you know, I've got an 80% win rate on Talia middle lane, or, you know, I've got a 73% win rate with Nasus top lane. This can be very misleading, and here's some ways that it can be. So statistically, if you think about it, if it's a low sample size, so I just showed it, I think, right here on Champion Analytics. If we look at win rate, you know, a lot of people point to, oh my god, Sion, you know, he's such a good champion, you know, he's got an awesome win rate, why don't I just play Sion every game? This, right here. See that number? Less than 1% of games played are Sion. What this indicates to me is that he's potentially a specialty pick by specialists. So this is people that are playing him into very specific matchups. They probably have a lot of experience with him. And, you know, it might be someone that duos with him. The market is so small, if it's less than 1%, you know, it's probably like 5 people playing him 95% of the games that he's played. So it's just not a good indicator of overall success rate, right? So someone like Veigar support is similar, right? So it's a very special list of people that are playing him. Now, you can play him and win, of course, but that's a big problem with this stat. Now, Blitzcrank is for real, okay? Like, that's actually, I didn't realize that win percent is that high. Like, that's a 24% pick rate. That's extremely high pick rate for that kind of win rate. So that's the real deal. That's the thing you should be looking at statistically, where you're like, okay, that's a dang good pick, because it's 55% off of 25% of people playing him. So that's for real. But these things like Veigar and Sion, you can play them if you want, but just be very careful with those stats because that's such a low sample size. You know, if it's less than 10%, you probably need to be careful, or maybe even 5%. 5% is probably a good one because a lot of people like Thresh is really high, but most of these champions are 5 or 10%. Wow, Nami's picked more than Janna? Anyways, I would say 5 is probably reasonable. If it's like around 5%, then that's picked a decent amount of the time. Okay, so meta variables. This is another one, and this happened with Zyra that I just mentioned a little bit ago. Let me go ahead and pull up another. Well, whatever. I'll just pull it up on this one. This happened with Zyra. Yeah, we could set that up. I'll answer him after the video. So my poor Zyra here, you know, I had, and it's not going to tell me what it was earlier in the season, I don't think, but, you know, the first 200 games of Zyra, it was extremely high. It was like 65% 200 games. I mean, the first 100 games was like 70% or something. It was crazy. But that was patches 7.1 to 7.4. Okay? So that was when lethality was really popular. Everyone was playing AD in every position, so that we needed AP on teams. There was really high damage, so that means that they could follow up on Zyra. So if I hit them with a root ultimate, you know, I do 30%, or not 30%, I do 70% of their health, then I could count on that gen to roll up and do that final 30%. Or I could count on, you know, Varus to follow up with his ultimate, or just hit him with an arrow for that final 30%. Well, the meta changed, and I lost a lot with Zyra. Like, since 7.5, I've probably gone like 3-17 with Zyra or something. Maybe even worse than that. It's been abysmal with Zyra. I just cannot win games with her. And this is a champion I have a ton of experience with. I mean, I have 300 games this season, and back in season 3, I think I had like 400 games with her. So I'm very, very familiar with Zyra, and I consider myself to be a pretty strong Zyra player. But I had to switch off of her. So even though statistically I still have a good win rate, 56, it used to be 65. And I just had to face the facts eventually that the meta changed. And although she's still good at bronze and silver, now I was platinum 1 yesterday. I got demoted. Now I'm platinum 2. We'll get back up there. But now I'm, approaching diamond, high platinum diamond. And there's just, it's rough. Because people are playing very mobile champions, such as, Lucian, Ezreal, Ahri. All of these are very good against Zyra. And everyone's building Blade the Ruined King early, which has a terrible build path. Like, you don't do damage early game if you get Blade the Ruined King. Like, you start doing some damage once you complete Blade around, 14, 13 minutes, something like that. But that's too late. Like, Zyra needs to have pressure in lane early. She needs to beat people up. And she needs to have a kill at level 6, all in. But also, because everyone's building Blade, they all have sustain. So you can't even poke in lane anymore, because they're going to heal through your poke as Zyra. And your own team's also going to have Blade the Ruined King. So that means they're not going to have the damage. And games are just slowing down in general. A lot of people are picking farm junglers. Junglers in general have been nerfed. It's slower to clear the jungle. There's just less damage. They've done a lot of things to slow down games. And that means that champions like Janna and Lulu are able to get to Locket and Redemption before Zyra can close out the game. And once they get Locket and Redemption with wind speakers, it's lights out. Like, you're just not going to burst through them anymore, typically, unless you're really far ahead. And you're not going to be really far ahead because of the reasons I just described. So the meta changed. So even though I had a really high win percentage, and I still have a good win percentage for that many games with Zyra, I had to move off of her because the statistics are misleading. It looks like, oh man, he's really good with Zyra. It's 56%. It's like, yes, I'm still like pretty good with Zyra, but it was much higher. I was better with her because of the meta. I was more successful with her, I should say. But now, even though it looks like I could be successful with 56%, it's not a wise idea because the meta has changed. So she's another champion. I break her out every now and then in some situations, but I had to put her on the shelf for a little bit. She'll come back. But for now, she's on the back burner. Okay, pick priority is another thing to consider in terms of stats. So some champions might have a really low or a really high percentage based on when people are picking them. So a champion might have a really high percentage if it is picked into very specific counter picks. So what's an example here? So let me see here. So like, is there one for support? Like, one reason that Blitz is really good right now in terms of overall win rate is because he's very good against Lulu and Janna and all these squishy champions. Because tanks aren't really that great right now in the meta, then Blitzcrank can grab any number of supports and potentially kill them. So that's what's making him good. So it's because he's a specific counter pick. And another good example is last season, I would only pick Janna into Vayne, or with Vayne, like the January before last, so like 14, 15 months ago. People were just picking Vayne all the time. She was really bad in the current meta, but Janna was the best person to play with Vayne in that meta. And so I always picked Janna with Vayne. Even though I was probably going to lose the game, that gave us the best chance to win the game. So I had a low win rate with Janna. So I had like a 44% win rate with Janna for a lot of last season. Because I would only pick her as a specific complement to Vayne in that meta. So it looks like, man, statistically, man, that dude sucks with Janna because he's only got a 44% win rate. Well, that's not taking into account the context. And then later on, when if we look at Season 6, later on, when Caitlyn started to become really popular in the meta, and Janna's very good with Caitlyn, I started picking Janna a lot more with a champion that was actually strong. Then I ended the season with 54%. So even though I had 44% earlier in the season, in the back half of the season I had about a 65%, and that averaged out to 54%. So the meta changed, the situation where I picked her changed, and so her winning percentage changed. Okay, what's our last couple of ones here? Someone could duo queue all the time or boost to get those numbers, especially with those low sample sizes. So some champions are notorious booster champions. Let me see here if that actually applies. I haven't looked at this, but top lane. Like Pantheon and Quinn are both notorious booster champions. This is something where if you snowball early, you can get really far ahead and completely dominate and take over games. So, you know, these champions can like artificially have a very high win percentage, especially if they have a low pick percentage like Talon, like Quinn, because these are what boosters play, and top lane is a very popular lane to boost from because they have these snowbally champions. So if you have really good game knowledge, if you're really good at rotating, if you really know matchups well, then you can go through and boost really easily with these champions. That doesn't mean they're good for everybody, but it does mean that they're good for boosters. And because they have such a low pick rate, then it's going to make their numbers look really high. Let's see mid lane. Cassidon's not especially a booster champion. It really applies probably mostly to top. Pantheon's another booster here again. I think Zen in theory could be. I don't know. Anyways, you have on small sample sizes, once again, that kind of goes back to small sample sizes. Someone could have a really high win percentage, you know, based on a boost or a duo, especially if they have very low amount of games played. So maybe they only play with their friend bottom every single game, and that's why, you know, they have a, you know, an 80% win rate with Kog'Maw. And so when they go play without their friend, and they play in your game, then all of a sudden, you know, they might be awful. So that's something to keep in mind. Another one is the elo context. So certain champions are much better at higher elos than they are at lower elos. So for example, Lee Sin at Platinum Plus, which is what it says right here, uses data from Platinum and higher. Oh, this is in Korea too. Region Korea. I didn't pick Korea, I didn't think. North America. I don't know why it's saying region Korea. That's weird. It matters by region too, so not just by elo, but also by region. But anyway, some champions might just be really good in high elos. Like pros might just be really good with them. You know, Karma's a great example here. Karma is excellent at mid diamond and higher, but she's really bad in bronze and silver. Well, really bad's a strong word, but she's not as good in bronze and silver. So that could be an important context to keep in mind if you're thinking of playing them. Okay. God, this video is so much longer than I intended it to be. I really wanted to just do an hour-long video, but there's just so much to cover here. So overall, experience in isolation is a weak indicator. So just because someone has a lot of games with a champion or they have a lot of mastery points, that's the least strong indicator of whether or not your team is going to win the game. So winning lane theory and stronger champion pick theory is much, much easier to quantify and predict than experience theory because of all these problems with measuring experience, whether it's in terms of games played or in terms of overall statistics. So keep that in mind, keep that in your back pocket. You know, if you combine this with everything else, it can be a good indicator. So for example, if somebody has 1,000 Cassidon games right now and they pick Cassidon, then that's really good. If they have 1,000 Urgot games and they pick Urgot jungle, that may not be good. So if experience also correlates with with winning lane and or with strong champion, then there's a high chance that that's going to be a successful player. So if they pick a strong champion and it's a winning lane and they have experience on it, that's the golden triangle there. They're almost certainly going to win that lane. They're almost certainly going, you can take it to the bank. They're going to be worth a 20% chance to win the game for that player's position. So, you know, if you have 3 people on your team and all 3 of those people have experience on their champion, they have a winning lane, and they're picking overall strong champions in a particular meta, I will guarantee you that you have at least a 60% chance to win that game or more, and you should not dodge it. That's just like, that's the golden triangle. That's exactly what you want. But you very rarely get all three of those. And so if you're trying to prioritize, I think that probably the lane theory is the most accurate one, and then strong champion, and then experience theory. Mentality is another one that's difficult to assess. You should probably just, if someone is raging on your team and they're they're just in a really bad mood and yelling at people and arguing, you should very strongly consider dodging the game unless, you know, you have overwhelming odds against them, it seems. So unless everyone's very experienced on their champions, they're all going to win the game, their lane, and they're all picking very strong champions, you should very, very heavily consider dodging if there's a lot of mentality issues in champion select. So a good rule of thumb on whether or not you should use that dodge is if the enemy team has at least 2 winning lanes and at least 3 of 5 stronger champions, you should consider a dodge. So combine the first 2. You can think about experience as well. If another couple of people on your team don't have a lot of experience with their champions, if they're first time playing a certain champion in the game, then that should even more tilt you towards a dodge. Okay, so that's the best I can give you there. Just think about this stuff when you're thinking about dodging. Hopefully this can give you kind of some ballpark figures. So sometimes, you know, on stream, I'll say something like, you know, I dodged that. I think we had like a 25% chance to win or something. This is kind of what's running through my head when I'm making those kind of rough calculations. So I just want to spell it out here so you can run through the same process for yours. So once again, it's not exact science, but if you can master how to think of this stuff and at least come up with some ballpark figures and dodge the right games, then you're going to gain a lot of elo. Okay, then I went ahead and linked a guide for champion compositions. So if you want to know more about which champions are good with which other champions, which champions are pretty good for solo queue in general. So this kind of reiterates some of the stuff that I talk about in this video, but I expand on it some. It could be worth a look. The back half of the video, I published this on January 2nd. So the back half that's about 38 onwards, the best supports and their matchups, that could be a lot different based on the current meta. So if you're going to skip something, I would skip 38 on. But I do think that up to the 38th minute, there's a lot of good stuff that applies in any elo. So it applies right now. And I've got things like why are compositions important, what makes for a good composition, 6 qualities of a good champion for solo queue, 2 strategies that are good for pros, and a good explanation of what scaling is and how it works. I'll also talk about what scaling is and how it works in my itemization video if you want to check that out. This one's very new. Defense. So I just published this, I guess about 6 days ago or so. But I have a section about scaling as well right there. So at 110 or so, I talk about scaling and why it's important, and then I apply that to Twitch and Draven. Talk about why they're important. So I do think that that could be really good. If you're not sure like how to measure if something scales better than something else, it could be worthwhile to look at that. Okay, that's going to be it. Sorry, this is a super long video, but I do think there's a ton of great information there. Hopefully you'll skip around and find the stuff that you want to see in the timestamps. And that's going to be it. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time.